I believe it's true that no child wishes to be considered odd or strange or weird or just kind of excluded by his peers. As we observe children, we can see how they want to fit in and be accepted. And so they tend to imitate some of the other children around them. They learn to conform. And that's not only true for children, we adults do it in many ways. Oftentimes we don't want to stand apart from the crowd or the group. Oftentimes we can copy the behavior, the attitudes, and values of those around us. We want to be accepted, and so we can easily conform. It's not all bad. I mean, living in a society, there's a certain amount of conforming that we need to do. Can you imagine driving home today and saying, well, I don't want to drive on the right side of the road, I want to drive on the other? Life would be a bit chaotic if we didn't conform to certain rules and behaviors and expectations. In many ways, today's readings speak about conforming or not conforming. Conforming to what is a very important thing. We hear in prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah, of all the prophets, is the one that I would hold up to be one that we can easily relate to. He wears his feelings on his sleeve, so to speak. We know what he's feeling. In this powerful reading, he's letting God have it. You duped me, Lord. And worst of all, I let myself be duped. And he's speaking about the challenge, the suffering, the rejection that he is encountering as being God's prophet. Not only did God choose him at a very young age, he's still a teenager, but God gave him the most difficult of all messages, going completely against what everybody held to be true. Their country was under attack, or was close to being under attack. And he's saying, Jeremiah's message from God was don't even fight, don't even put up resistance, trust in God. Be faithful to him. This is a punishment of your infidelity. Who would want to listen to a message like that? It was demoralizing if you were a leader. It's demoralizing to the spirit of the people to defend themselves, to find security. But Jeremiah decided not to conform to those around him, but rather conformed his will to God's will. He spoke that message, and he's upset because of the consequences of that message, of how he was rejected, ridiculed, tortured, and left for dead. Jeremiah had to pay a consequence in order to be faithful. In the second reading, we hear a similar message, where St. Paul is telling us not to conform ourselves to the present age, but rather give our lives, ourselves, as a sacrifice of love to God. So rather conforming our lives, maybe in other words, imitating our lives on that of Christ himself, not to the age around us, not to the expectations that others may have, or conforming to those around us just so that we may be accepted, so that we would not have to face ridicule or judgmental attitudes or rejection. Rather, we conform ourselves, all of ourselves. He talks about our bodies, but also our thinking, putting on the mind of Christ, and our will to that of Christ. How difficult that is to do. And Peter, in today's gospel, shows how difficult that is. This is a continuation of what Peter, last Sunday we heard his confession of faith. You are the Lord, you are the Messiah. Peter got it right. But yet, what he did not get right, as we see in today's gospel, what that means. Would he be willing to conform to following Christ as Christ truly is, or as we see what Peter wanted to tell Christ the way he should be a Messiah? Can you imagine that? Here's Peter telling Jesus how you need to be the Son of God. This is the way that you need to save the world. Don't go down this path that you're talking about of suffering, this sacrificial love. Don't do that. It's scandalous. And those harsh words of Jesus, saying, "Get behind me, Satan." One moment raising Peter up as saying, "You are the rock on which I will build my church." And on the other hand, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, you are an obstacle to me." How that must have hurt Peter. But yet, how Peter needed to hear that. Because he was trying to create Jesus, the Messiah, in his own image and likeness. He wanted Jesus to be the glorious Messiah. And Jesus, if you're that glorious Messiah, if you promise me prosperity, comfort, and everything else that I may be hoping for, I will certainly follow you. Why not? I want to have a great place in your kingdom. But Jesus is saying the reverse. I will promise you many, many good things. But it's coming out of the cross. It's coming out of sacrificial love. It means dying to yourself, denying yourself, taking up that cross. Just not waiting for that cross to enter your path, but taking up that cross in sacrificial love and following me. Making that decision daily. That's a hard message for Peter to hear, and that's a hard message for us. Don't we want to follow Christ in the way that Peter initially wanted to follow Christ? Don't we, whether we are conscious about it or not, often want to look for the easy road? The road that doesn't involve so much suffering, so much pain. At times we try to avoid it. Again, sometimes it's not even rational. Sometimes it just might be something that might come to us as a default without even thinking. But we need to examine those things in our lives. Because the road to salvation, the road to eternal happiness, the road to knowing that love of Christ and growing in that love is by conforming our lives to His. That's the way of salvation. That's the way of discipleship. Is there a cost? Indeed there is. But as we know in the sacrifices that we make for those around us that we love, the willingness that we have to give of ourselves to others, we see in our everyday living when we reach out to someone else in love, of how that changes us, how that makes us more Christ-like, how that gives us a greater sense of peace and security. That even in the midst of persecution, of rejection, of difficulties, we know that when we are not telling Christ what to do, but rather we get behind Him, we follow behind Him, there's that security. The security that only He can give. That security that allows us to continually live a life of conversion, knowing that we haven't arrived. That our faith isn't about only what we ask for and what we can receive, but most importantly, in imitating Christ, of how we can give our lives, how we can lay down our lives for others. That's the promise. That's the promise of discipleship. That's the promise of the Eucharist that gathers us together today. The promise of new life in Christ, who has given us His life in a sacrificial love. And so let us receive that life and lay down our life for one another.